George, what's up, brother? So great to see you again. A little different than last time. We have to do this virtually as opposed to in person.
I know, but you still look just as good as last time. You've been taking care of yourself, I see.
I probably look better because the camera maybe sometimes can hide some of the blemishes and the I don't know. They say the camera puts on 10 pounds, so I'm not sure.
I didn't plan to be in front of a camera for the rest of my life. And so this is what God gave me. I'm working with it, and you are too. We
We're
can't
just
all
doing the
be
best.
Dr. John Deloney.
That's right. And I see how many followers he has and his posts and how much interaction. And I mean, clearly it's because of his looks. It isn't because of his content. We know that.
Any guy over 6 feet tall, I feel like their life's just easier. And so as a short king myself, it is a struggle. We can talk about that later. I'll unpack it with you.
So, one of the questions that I had written down in preparation for our discussion today is how you got a job with the Ramsey team. Because I did a little research, I saw a few things, and like all of a sudden I was like, oh, so I just went and got a job with Dave Ramsey, and that doesn't just happen. But it's interesting because you're talking about looks and being in front of a camera and all this kind of stuff. I am very curious about that particular part of your journey.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I actually started as an intern and a temp here at Ramsey Solutions back in 2013. And I truly
Mm.
didn't really know Dave Ramsey. I grew up in Boston in the Northeast, and so it wasn't as big as, he is in the South in the Bible Belt, with churches doing Financial Peace University. And so the reason I ended up here was I was kind of a marketing, social media, tech guy coming from the musician background, and I saw an opening for a social media role for the personalities. And so I'm a Ramsey personality now. I actually came on board to help another personality who's no longer on the team, but that was really my goal. I was excited about helping that person spread the message in a creative way and something they were passionate about. And so that's kind of what brought me into Ramsey. It got me in the door, and that turned into a full-time role in email marketing, into social media, and that spiraled into a host and MC role, which has turned into this personality role. So I've had 6 jobs at this one company in 10 years, which I think is a world record for a millennial, just to hold a job at one place for a decade.
fair, fair enough. And I mean, it's a great organization to work with. I was out there several years ago. And one thing that struck me, I remember pulling into the parking lot and you guys were building I don't even know what you call it, but there's a building that you were building at the time for conferences. Was it is it a conference
Yeah, we have
center?
an event center up on the hill
Event
now.
center. Yeah, I'm sure. Is that done at this point?
It's done. Yeah, we opened
Yeah.
it this past year, and it's been amazing to use for staff meeting and devotionals and our live events. It's been a
Yeah.
really cool space to have.
Yeah, I remember pulling in and I parked the car and I walked to the front door and I saw a bunch of young, energetic, good-looking people. And I thought to myself, I mean, I knew a little bit about what I was getting myself into, but I thought this has got to be just the most amazing entrance. I hadn't even walked in the building because everybody, like I said, young, energetic, looked like they took care of themselves. I was impressed before I even set foot in the door.
Do they that we Dave always says that we hire thoroughbreds, not donkeys around here, and
Mm.
thoroughbreds run with thoroughbreds. And so we have an amazing team, over 1,000 people now. People think that we do the Ramsey show out of like a double wide or something. They show up to the headquarters and it's a whole fan experience in multiple buildings. And what Dave has built is truly just a massive empire, and it's built on helping people become debt free, live with financial freedom, live with freedom in all areas, career, mental health, now with Dr. John Deloney. And he did it all with cash, which is just as mind blowing.
Yeah, it was probably a huge benefit to you, maybe an unintended benefit because you talk a lot about how you were broke. Yet you were in debt and you had, I think, 40 plus $1,000 of student loan debt, like most people do. When you're in there in your position, and so this was got to be this huge blessing in disguise that not only are you going to be earning an income and making a career out of doing the social media marketing, but we're financial learning. You're immersed in the world of finances, which is an education, unfortunately, most people just don't get.
Yeah, as part of the onboarding process for a team member, if you haven't gone through Financial Peace University, which is our 9-lesson flagship money course, you're required to go through it to understand, hey, here's the principles we live by. Here's the values. If it's not for you, you need to opt out in this first 90 days because we actually practice what we preach. And so that was an amazing opportunity to understand the kind of toxic money culture and how to break free from that. And it's what put me on that path over a decade, from going from broke to millionaire and getting out of that consumer debt, building wealth, paying off our house. All of that stemmed from that first course and learning from Dave. And now I get to sit beside him on the Ramsey show and glean even more wisdom, which is a true privilege.
As a former financial advisor, I don't know whether you knew that or not. I was doing some
Oh,
financial advisory stuff
wow.
for almost a
I thought you
decade.
had a background in finances. I didn't
Yeah.
know you were in the advising space. Wow.
Yeah,
You've
it
seen
was
it all.
interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot. It was interesting to me. Money is just, if we strip everything else away, it's math, right? But there's so much emotion and bias and experiences and beliefs and myths that are infused into our belief about money that I think are adopted at an early age. It was amazing to see how many people had toxic beliefs about what money was and what it was used for and how you can build it. And that's something that I had to focus on breaking down before I could talk to people about what type of return we could get them in the market.
Man, you're so right. And it's seriously one of the reasons I wrote my new book, Breaking Free from Broke, is to unpack all of these myths, to help people deprogram and unplug from this money matrix that we all grew up in. Whether you had no financial literacy or you were taught the wrong things, there's so much paradigm shifting that needs to happen, and it's difficult. And so the first 2/3 of my book is just that. It's a paradigm shift where I'm saying, here's what the debt system is actually made to do. Here's how it started. Here's where we are today. And here's how you can break free and have financial freedom and build wealth peacefully without all the noise and distractions. Because you're right, the path and gap from financial stress to financial peace is littered with myths and distractions and noise and TikTokers telling you that you need whole life insurance to build wealth. And here's what the wealthy do. And at some point, we need to stop the paralysis analysis and just follow a proven plan. And that is what the Ramsey Baby Steps did for me.
It's funny you talk about whole life because I grew up in the industry with a whole life insurance company, so we were taught to dislike Dave Ramsey. I'm saying it nicely, to
Yes.
dislike Dave
Well,
Ramsey.
truthfully, Dave has been, rocking and knocking on the whole life industry for so long that no one in that industry likes Dave.
Of course, yeah. And so I remember, I actually remember again years ago when I came out to you guys and I was able to interview Dave and John and talk with you as well while I was out there. Um, One of my former colleagues messaged me because I think he knew I was going out there. I had maybe had mentioned it on social media, and he's like, "What are you doing? I can't believe you."
You're in enemy territory.
I had become a traitor to the industry at that point, which was really interesting to me. Um,
Wow.
when you say money matrix, what do you mean by that?
Well, I make the analogy in the book as we shift from how you're chained to the system and how to break free from the system. I make the analogy because I'm super relevant and hip to the 1999 sci-fi thriller The Matrix,
It will always be
where
relevant. Let's just throw that out there right
always,
now.
but it's a good analogy because there's this simulation that we're told is real life, and I'm out here yelling from the street corner with my cardboard sign, being like, it's not real life. It's a simulation that's designed to keep you restrained and keep you chained and keep you reliant on the system. And if we can break free from that money matrix, which I describe as this culture of debt and our obsession with payments and our obsession with building wealth the wrong way, when you break free from that into reality, like debt is a thief and budgeting is freedom and spending is self-control and margin is breathing room and generosity is joy, I believe those principles will help us live a much better life and become the people we want to become with less money, stress, and more peace. So that's the matrix. Is that we're a hamster on the wheel. Every complaint that we've had usually ties back to the matrix. It's inflation, and it's the housing market, and it's the president, and it's Congress and the Fed, and they got to stop screwing with this man. And I don't want to work a 9 to 5 working for the man. All of these feelings are wrapped in a lot of this mythology, and everything is kind of, we don't have control. We don't have autonomy. Life is happening to us. And so what I want from this book is for you to walk away going, I have agency over my life. I'm going to take control of my money, regardless of who's in the White House, regardless of what happens in the economy. I'm going to win in spite of all of that. And those are the people that inspire me. And that's what I hope we can all become.
I mean, I love what you guys are doing. I was driving down the road the other day, and I think about this quite often because I'm a little bit sick, and I'm also, my background is in the industry. I see these people driving these 80, $90,000 trucks. And look, I do well financially. I know I do well financially. Like if you compare my income to the majority, their average of Americans, it's better than that. And I look at that, I'm like, I don't know how all these people afford. I can't afford that. But I got thinking, it's because I know what afford actually means. I think Dave Ramsey says afford doesn't mean you can afford the payment. And that's what
Mm.
most people are looking at it as.
Yeah. We always say broke people, here's the questions they ask: how much down, how much a month?
Mm,
Wealthy people with freedom, they ask how much.
right.
That's it. They wanted the total cost. And when you think about it in terms of that, America wouldn't be in debt if we just counted the cost and said, if we can't afford it, we're not going to buy it. But what's happened,
Hmm.
Ryan, is we've gotten so comfortable because of the gateway drugs of credit scores and credit cards. We get comfortable with the payment. Can I afford the payment? And so we're going to have a car payment. We can afford the student loan payment. We can afford the mortgage payment. And then we look up and we're broke, unable to save for retirement, unable to give the way we want. And all of it stems back to this lifestyle of getting used to payments. And so you're right. People are driving around their retirement right now in these $90,000 trucks. And as cars go up, it's exactly what happened with college tuition. Colleges realized, thanks to student loans, we can just raise tuition as high as we want, and people will just take out more loans. Well, the car industry is much of the same. It's supply and demand, and they realize we can just raise the price of the cars, and people will just take on a slightly bigger payment. And so that's one of the reasons keeping car prices so astronomically high. And then there's also brand association and our reputation and ego wrapped up in our metal boxes that we drive around. And
Yeah.
that stems from probably childhood trauma that is unaddressed. And so we have to go get the biggest, meanest truck we can get, or whatever that sports car is that you've always dreamed of. And it's a depreciating asset that's causing so many Americans to just not be able to build wealth. I call it America's number one wealth killer right now is the car loan.
Interesting. I was talking with someone the other day and this hadn't even crossed my mind. We were talking about how expensive vehicles are. And they said, oh, and they're probably on a 7-year note. And I'm like, wait, what? I didn't even know that was a thing because I don't buy cars on loan. So my prized vehicle possession, I've got three vehicles. One is like my nice truck. One is, the one that I really like. And the other one is just kind of an off-road beater. And I've got this 99 Toyota Tacoma. It's been paid off for probably
Yes.
20 years. I think I've had it paid off for. And, I put a couple of grand into it over the last several months just on fixing some of the interior and replacing some things here and there, putting some new tires on it, stuff like that. But man,
Dude, that car
that's
is going to
that's the
outlast both of
vehicle.
us.
That's the one I like right there. I'm at 200 and I think 65,000 miles. I got to get that thing up to 300,000. So we'll get there.
Wow. Well, that's another myth is people go, oh, if it's over 100,000 miles, time for a new car. I got to get
Yeah,
rid of this death mobile. I'm
I
like, guys,
know.
get a reliable car and take care of it, and it will go hundreds of thousands of miles. And so it's a big myth out there. People just want to really they're trading it in for their ego because they just want to drive a nicer car. It's not for safety and reliability. It's for them to feel good. And I think we got to stop that mentality and upgrade in cash. And if it's good enough for Ryan, I think we should all be following that, buying our cars with cash, and you free up a payment right there, and you get to live life differently.
Yeah. I mean, you hear people say, oh, like, I wish I could afford to go on vacations and you can. You just can't be strapped with car loans and
Take that
unnecessary
$500
mortgage
payment
payments.
times 12. That's 6 grand a year that you've
Have a
paid
nice
while your car is
vacation.
going down in value.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's really interesting to see people go down. I mean, interesting is a mild way to put it, but it's really unfortunate that people are just strapping themselves with debt and they're wondering why they're so broke. And then they blame, like you said, the president or the economy. And I tend to look at it and say, create your own economy. We
Mm.
can't really control what the president does. We can't really control what the global market at this point is doing, but you can control your own personal economy. And that's what we ought to be doing a better job at.
Absolutely. And once the goal of getting out of debt is not just like a cool flag you can wave of I'm debt free. It just gives you more margin and more options to do the things you want to do. And for some people, that's giving more or building wealth. And it's amazing to me that people out there are yelling from their social media feeds that the wealthy people, they leverage debt up to their eyeballs. That's what they do. And I'm sitting next to Dave Ramsay, who owns hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate, all paid for in cash. And I'm like, not this guy, not so
Mm-hmm.
many others that I've met on the debt free stage who become multimillionaires following a proven plan. They don't have any debt to their name and they're able to invest more. They're able to give more. And I think that's what's missing, in today's world is we're so frustrated and yet we're not really holding up the mirror to go like, hey, I am part of the problem. And it's not all your fault, but it's your responsibility to take that next step. And I love that idea of creating your own economy where you're kind of insulated. When you have an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months and no payments in the world, you just look at a pandemic differently. You look at your career
Right.
differently.
I like that you're talking about what you can do when you get these basics right, because for a long time, I just believed, hey, look, for me, when I looked at the baby steps, I was like, yeah, great. Okay, budget, have the emergency fund. This is all basic stuff, right? And I'm not discounting it. I think I did before, but I'm not now because I see where people are. Like, we can't discount the basics. But then I also look at my own personal situation, and I've got real estate and I'm building businesses. I have multiple businesses, and that's where a lot of my wealth comes from. And so I saw this disconnect between what Dave was saying with regards to the baby steps, but the way that he built his true wealth, which is through business and real estate. And it's the way that
Absolutely.
I've done it. And I imagine you're on the same path. Um, is Help me understand that gap, or bridge that gap for me, because I think it's important people see that, at least the way I look at it, is you can get to the real estate, you can get to the businesses, but unless you get the basics done first, that stuff's not going to play as well as if you did get those basics right.
Absolutely. Dave didn't amass his wealth just by getting out of debt and investing in his 401k.
Right. By
He
eating
did it
beans
by
and
being an
rice. I mean, come
amazing
on.
entrepreneur. Exactly. You can't eat beans and rice to billionaire status. It's not going to
Right.
happen. And so Dave talks about that concept in his book, Baby Steps Millionaires, the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire. Our plan is not, become a billionaire. It's, hey, you can retire with $1 to $10 million. But if you're looking to get even more than that, most of those people, if you look at them, they're business owners. They have a lot of real estate. They own a business. They've sold a business. And so we have a deep love for entrepreneurs. You were on our EntreLeadership podcast, which I was
Right.
hosting at the time. I've now passed the baton to Dave, and he gets to take questions from callers who are small business owners and help them take the next step. And so it's been really cool. We have a huge heart for small business owners, and we love entrepreneurship. Dave started this place on a card table in his living room, and now here we are, over 1,000 team members. And that's not everyone's goal, but I love that entrepreneurship in today's world, it's hard and it's still a grind, but man, there's so much opportunity out there with technology and social media and the internet. You can just go start a business tomorrow if you want, which wasn't the case, 30 years ago. It was a lot harder. So it's a really cool path to build wealth when you do it the smart way. And by that, I mean, you're not going to take out $100,000 loan to try to start this business. Do it at the speed of cash. And that way you lower your risk, you increase your potential to be successful and make it sustainable. And it's how we coach business owners every day.
I'm actually really interested in your personal story, because I know there's a lot of people who may be taking on a job that is just a job. You go do social media marketing, and very easily you could have done that with any other organization, and it could have just been a job. I think, and I'm not discounting what you've done to get yourself to where you are, but I think the fact that you work with an incredible company that has a growth mindset, that is, oriented towards developing and bringing people up, is a huge blessing for you. I imagine. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what was your journey like, and what specifically did you personally do to promote, to create new opportunities within the organization? Because there's a lot of guys who aren't satisfied with where they are right now.
That's a great question. I think if you look back in my career journey, having, 6 jobs here at Ramsey over the last 10 years, at every step of the way, when there was that new opportunity, it took a few things. Number one, it took me just putting my head down and being faithful and excelling in whatever was in front of me. And so I think that kind of work ethic and discipline, it begets more opportunity. And so when I did that, leaders noticed. And the best leaders in my life at Ramsey and otherwise, they see something in you that maybe you don't even see in yourself, and they point it out and they help you get that opportunity. So I think it's both, and it's me seeking out those opportunities, but it's also a leader believing in me, saying, hey, I think you could go do this over here. And that takes some paying attention. If you're a leader out there and you've got team members, you need to invest in your team. It needs to be more than a management role. The best leaders help you improve your life, not just your career. And that belief is everything. And so at every step of the way, I got a little more rope and a little more rope. And so for me, making the gap from marketing to on camera, on stage personality, that was an interesting gap. And we have a Battle of the Bands event that we do here at Ramsey every year. So team members gather, they form cover bands, and they compete. And it's a really fun team building event. And I was in those bands for a few years. And I realized, hey, there's a gap here with the hosting that I think I could really bring something to the table. The MC who carries the event. And so I brought my whole self to that, with creativity, with humor, with music, with really fun ideas. And they saw me on that stage and went, hey, what if that guy could host our live events? He can carry himself on stage. He really believes in this place. He's followed the money principles. And so they gave me a shot. And so I took over for our friend Ken Coleman, who's now a personality, and I became host of the Ramsey Show video channel and host of all the Ramsey live events. That turned into me hosting a podcast called Borrowed Future on the student loan crisis from Ramsey Network. That turned into me getting my own podcast called The Fine Print, where I unpacked a lot of these money myths and systems I unpack in the book. And so at every step of the way, it was a little more rope and a little more rope. I was faithful in whatever the next thing was. I lived out the principles, and everyone saw that and went, this guy can do the next thing and the next thing. And so I stand before you today, not as a guy who's super special with unbelievable talent, because there's people who are way smarter than me when it comes to finances. You're one of them, coming from the financial advisor world. There's people who are better looking with more on-air talent, but I'm just a guy who was faithful every single day, showing up, doing the work, doing whatever it took. And over 10 years, just like my financial journey, it's amazing what can happen. It's almost like compound growth, but with your career.
I noticed you said you didn't say you're one of them when you said there's people that are better looking than you. I'm a little
I didn't want
disappointed.
to give you I didn't want your head to explode, Ryan, because we know everyone wants to be Ryan. They want to look like, you look like you just
Yeah,
came out from cutting wood
sure.
outside, just chopping up the wood. And then we got a podcast to do. You even have
How'd
the
you
axe in
know?
your
How'd you
logo. You
know,
know what I
man?
mean?
Come on. Look, we got another half of this conversation left, but I think at least the way I'm hearing it, what you said, and I'm going to reiterate here, but what you said might be the most important thing that you said of this podcast. And that is that you noticed an opportunity or a gap, and then you put yourself in the position to fill it, which was emceeing the events. And that, because what I was going to ask before you said that, as I said, I even wrote it down right here. You've got 1,000 people at the organization. How did you set yourself apart? Because I'm willing to bet that 90, 80, 90%, if we're using Pareto principle, 80% of those people, you could say the same thing about. They're hard workers. They look for opportunities. They tap into their skills. How did you set yourself apart from the other 999 people? You just told me what it was.
Yeah, there's definitely a piece of persistence, but in the right way. Because we've all, like, when people say just be persistent, well, that can backfire pretty quickly. You know what I mean? You start knocking
Sure.
on the door every single day going, hey, I'm here. And that can be annoying. It can be frustrating for leaders. So what I had to do was I knocked, and they'd be like, hey, that's cute, buddy, but go put your head down and work. And those are some of my most frustrating words. It was like, just go put your head down and do the work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I had to continually earn the trust and the right to even speak into things, and earn the right with every little accomplishment and every little task to go, hey, I did the work. Here's my assignment. I feel like I did a good job. And when you bring your whole self to it, there's a level of work ethic and also the people skills, the soft skills. There's the hard skill of just knowing how to do it,
Sure.
but there's the relational skills. And that's the part that I really had to work on is, relational equity is everything, and EQ is everything. Your emotional intelligence within an organization or in a business, it matters a whole lot. And so there's a lot of tact involved, and there's a lot of relationship building, and you can't just keep badgering people for things. You got to earn it and earn that relationship. And when you have a relationship, you've built trust, and trust is what leads to opportunity.
Was there ever a time in that 10-year tenure that I shouldn't say it that way, that 10-year time frame, uh, where you seriously thought about leaving the organization and going to pursue other opportunities, other ventures, maybe your own business even?
Yeah, and that's a real thing that happened. It was in around 2016. I'd gone through divorce, and so it was a really hard time in my life. And so I sort of had this existential crisis. I was doing kind of a hybrid social email role, and I wasn't really satisfied. And it didn't have a whole lot to do with Ramsey, but it was more of just like, what am I doing? What is life? Should I move back home to Boston and just restart? Should I go back and try to pursue music again? Is there something else out there for me? And as I was kind of healing along that journey, I got that opportunity. And so that changed everything for me. I also met my now wife at Ramsey Solutions. And so that was at the end, heading into 2017. I got that opportunity, and that leader spoke into me and said, hey, you're going to go do this event. We believe in you to go host this. And I was like, me? Is there a guy behind me that you meant to talk to? So that, coupled with, this woman entering my life who just changed everything, it gave me some pep in my step, and I got some mojo back. And I found that sweet spot that my friend Ken Coleman talks about, where your talent, your passion, your mission all align. And so if you're out there, keep going. Like, you don't know what's just on the other side of just grinding that out for another week or two, or a month or two, or a year or two. And I feel like we all just give up right on the cusp of something amazing happening in our life. And you talk to anyone who's had that kind of success over time, and they always will tell you, like, man, I was so close to giving up, and something said, just keep going, man. And it was that next opportunity that changed everything. And so there's a mindset of just not quitting. And it sounds kind of like rah rah siskum ba, but it's so true that people tend to give up right before that hope is on the other side.
I feel like that in my own life is God just giving me a little exam to see if I'm ready.
Yes.
Right. And he's like, all right, let's give you the exam. Let's see if you're ready. And if you pass it, then I know you're ready. And I'm going to present you with a whole lot more opportunity than you currently have. If you don't pass it, then you have to retake the course. And so if you keep doing the same things over and over again and having the same experiences and banging your head against the wall, it's because you didn't pass the exam.
That's so good.
And that exam is, it could be a divorce. It could be overcoming a loss of a job. It could be anything. If you pass that, then you're ready for the next thing. It's just waiting on the other side of that exam.
Yeah, if it's too easy, I don't think it was the right thing. There's a level of, you have to really believe it, and you have to have that kind of grinding season where it feels like, man, am I even making progress? And that applies to money too. I mean, when you're starting to do a budget or you're trying to get out of debt, that first season is really hard. But when you get to see that progress, it gives you a little bit of hope. You see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and that's all you need. That runway is what causes people to gain freedom and success in any area of their life.
So what about for you? I mean, you've got multiple successful podcasts at this point. You work with this great organization. You're obviously up and coming, growing. You're a Ramsay personality. You've just written a book. So now what do you do?
I love that question.
What's going to be next?
I started to have not an existential crisis, but it was sort of this question I was asking myself, and I sort of would ask of other people, of just like, and then what? If you ask anyone, like, hey, what's your dream? And they lay it all out. And it's sort of this idea of like, if you got everything you wanted, how would your life change? If you became a millionaire, how would your life change? And the truth is, none of it changes your life. Like, it all is really cool. And I'm very grateful for the success. And it's not a modesty thing. But when we paid off our house, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, we're retiring tomorrow. Like, you still had to get up and go to work and feed the dogs and wipe the dog's butt if you're me. You know what I mean? There's like this still the rhythm of life exists.
We don't know.
John Deloney has the same feelings, but French bulldogs are a different breed, literally.
This is true. I've got a friend who breeds them, and I understand the anatomical challenges with these types of dogs.
You have to love pain and suffering in order to own a French bulldog, and we own two. So it's one example, but it's so true. Like, whether it's having a successful business or becoming a millionaire or writing and launching a book, if I hit the bestseller list, we're going to all celebrate. But truthfully, it's not like this, oh my gosh, you've made it, retire tomorrow, give up. There's still this idea of like, and then what? And now what? And there can be this endless chase. And I see it a lot in the financial world as I have been reaching out, collaborating with other content creators in the financial space. Some of these folks have net worths of millions of dollars, 20 million plus. And it's almost like there's this never enough. They're never just content with where they are. And so truthfully, this year, one of my goals is just to pause and just be content. I'm a new dad. We got a 5-month-old little girl now, which has been life-changing. And I've just been trying to be more present and more just okay with the now, instead of always being like, well, what's next? Like, you made it to 1 million. When are you going to hit 2 million? Okay, you did this book, but now you got to follow it up with another bestseller. And you know what I mean? There's always that next. And so I'm trying to just pause and go like, everything is okay. Enjoy the moment. There doesn't always have to be a next goal. And we've hit all of our financial goals. We paid off the house. And we're like, okay, now we're going to upgrade my car. Okay, now we're going to upgrade my wife's car. Now we're going to go on this vacation. And at the end of the day, wealth is beautiful because it gives you options, but it doesn't make you the person you want to be. And so that's what I'm trying to aim at now, is what kind of person do I want to be? I want to be a person of character who is more generous. And so that helps me with a financial goal now. If we want to give more in 2024 and I want to be more present, I want to read more books. I've been a little lackadaisical. When you're writing a book, it's harder to read them. And so there's a lot of goals there that are not the next milestone and goal, but instead just trying to be present and grow more personally now.
I try to hear what my audience and the guys who are listening might think. And one thing that's playing in my mind right now is, well, that's really nice and easy for you to say because you're in this position where your house is paid off and you've upgraded the cars and you've got a best-selling book and all these things. But for me, I have to bust my butt because I've got the mortgage to pay, or we're not making the bills, or I just got hit with a $30,000 medical bill, or whatever, fill in the blank with whatever people are dealing with. What do you say to somebody like that who isn't on the tail end, but they're in the midst of it currently?
Man, we take those calls every day on the Ramsey show, and there's so many real hardships. You know, we like to joke that everyone's lifestyle's out of control and they're driving the truck with all these payments, but a lot of people, life just kind of punched them in the mouth and they weren't ready for it. And they had that emergency come up, and there's a health issue in the family, or the car went out and we don't have the money to make the repair happen. And so there's a lot of real hardships. I have a ton of empathy. If you're in that season of you're really on the front end of these baby steps and you're going, I got a mess of debt to clean up. I don't have the emergency fund. I'm not where I want to be when it comes to wealth. I found this is kind of a quote that I found really applies to my journey. People overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and they underestimate what they can accomplish in a decade. And so if that's you, all you can see right now is that thing a foot in front of your face, that medical bill, that health scare, whatever it is. It's really hard to then look at the big picture and go, 5 years from now, I'm going to be in a different place. And when you look at the Ramsey plan and the timeline of it, it's really encouraging to me because on average, people get their starter emergency fund, baby step 1, in 30 days. Great. We have a little buffer between us and life. Baby step 2, paying off all consumer debt, 18 to 24 months on average. Baby step 3, 3 to 6 months of expenses, happens in about 6 to 12 months on average. That's amazing. So think about that. 3 years may sound like a long way away from now, but think about the financial foundation you've built in 36 months. You don't owe anyone anything except for maybe your mortgage, and you have a pile of money ready to protect you in case life punches you in the mouth. And so that's a great place to be. And 3 years is going to be here, whether you like it or not. We're all going to be 3 years older. I mean, I saw you, 2 years ago now, and you still look exactly the same, I might add. But life's going to move.
I hope I'm looking a little better. I mean, that's the goal. I want to look a little better. So I got work to do, apparently.
Aging like a fine wine, or a bourbon, if you will. So I think it's true that it feels a long way away. And so 3 years from now, you're now building for the future instead of paying for the past. You're ready to invest 15%. You're ready to start putting away money for your kids' college fund and paying off the house early. And so when you look at it as a 10-year journey, if you're 34 or 44 right now, where do you want to be at 44 or 54? And if you can start setting those goals and reverse engineering it with some habits like budgeting, getting out of debt, and cutting up the credit cards, that's what accelerated the path for me. And obviously, you know, we didn't have kids at the time we were starting the journey. Our dual incomes really helped. And so if you have a spouse that's working, that's a huge benefit people don't think about, is having two incomes to plow through this stuff. It matters. And so do whatever it takes to get that financial footing under you, because the next 20 years of your life doesn't have to be stress and mediocrity and living the same generational curse that your parents maybe lived through. You can break free from that and change your family tree.
I mean, it's amazing to see it. I think with finances, sometimes it can be challenging because it takes time and it doesn't always manifest immediately. Like, you think about going to the gym. If you're severely overweight and you go to the gym, like in 30 days, you're going to lose some weight and you're going to start seeing some definition in your muscles. And that's fulfilling. That's rewarding. It keeps you going. But the longer you do it, the less the return, the law of diminishing returns, right? And I think that's the challenge with finances is you could be doing all the right things. Maybe you're paying an extra $200 or $300 or $500 a month on the debt snowball, and you still got debt, and you're going to have debt for 3 years. It's hard to stay in the game. Have you noticed that for people?
Yeah, there's two pieces of this. One is just the perseverance. And a lot of people go, I'm out. I got to sacrifice for 2 years. And one of the reasons we say you need gazelle intensity, you got to be really like scorched earth on this plan, is because it's too hard to focus on debt payoff for 5 years or 10 years. And that's why we want you to do it in 2 years or less is the goal. Now, some people it takes longer. My friend Jade Warshaw, another Ramsay personality, took her and her husband 7.5 years, but they had almost $500,000 in consumer debt. And so it's not this one size fits all, but the sooner you get out, the better your life is going to be. And, we think sacrifice is part of it. And most people are, if you're going to do Ramsey-ish, and you're going to just go, well, I still want to invest and I still want to go on vacation and I'm trying to pay off debt, you're just going to struggle for even longer. It's going to feel even more impossible as the interest adds up and those payments continue to steal your paycheck. So what I did was I got side hustles and side income going when I was 23, 25. Even as we were buying our first home, I was doing side hustles in order to increase income. So it's not always, people go like, well, my employer doesn't pay me enough. My employer paid me just fine. I was making good money, but I needed to make more than the 40 grand or whatever the starter salary was. I needed to go make 60 grand. And so look at your skills and look at your time and look at what you can do for the best hourly rate. And so I was designing websites. I was helping people launch podcasts. I was doing Uber and Lyft. I mean, whatever it was, I was doing it. On top of making more, I was also spending less. And so I would shop for what was on sale at the grocery store. I wouldn't eat out. I was cutting all subscriptions that I didn't use or need. And so that allowed me to have more margin to throw at the debt, which caused this whole thing to speed up.
I'm writing questions. I have so many questions for you. So I got to pick which one's going to be next. Actually, here's one thing I would say. The one thing I like a lot about the baby steps is that it accounts for what Stephen Pressfield. Are you familiar with Stephen Pressfield?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It accounts for what he calls the resistance. As soon as you pay off the car, the transmission goes out. Inevitably, it's going to go out. It's going to happen. Or you're going to need new tires because those ones only last for 12 months. And the reason I like the baby steps is because it accounts for the resistance that will come up and builds in the plan to make sure that when the resistance shows itself, and it will, that it doesn't completely derail you or set you back to baby step 0.
Absolutely. And baby step 3 is where you have that fully funded emergency fund. And that is a force field between you and life when you have that in place. And so in the book, I talk about how savings is peace. And when you have that peace, it's just better to go through life when you have 10 grand, 20 grand ready to protect you against the transmission or the HVAC or the health scare or whatever bill comes up. And so getting that, you got to make it a priority. You have to make it an emotional priority to go, this is important for me and my family. We're never going to go into debt again. That's what that fund becomes, because you're going to face resistance. And I talk about in that chapter, it feels like it's hard to have good luck when you're broke. It feels like life, Murphy is just always knocking on your door with another emergency and another bill. And it's amazing what happens when you get out of debt and you have an emergency fund. It feels like you have more good luck, but it's really not luck. You just are able to take care of your stuff better. And so it's breaking down less. You're able to upgrade with cash. And so it's amazing what happens. You sort of stop having emergencies once you have an emergency fund, because you're able to cash flow a lot of these ankle biters. Instead of everything feeling chaotic, it just becomes an inconvenience instead of an emergency. And I remember that when you had that car repair and you're broke, you are freaking out. But when it happens, when you have an emergency fund, you just kind of yawn, you get it taken care of, and you move on with your life. And that's the kind of peace we want people to have, that financial peace where they're not worried about the job loss or whatever else is coming their way, because they have that buffer between them and life. They're not relying on a credit card as a crutch. They got their own money in the bank.
Luck is such a dismissive way to look at other people's success too. I remember I made a sizable investment into Origin. And this is a company out of Maine. They're making, manufacturing durable goods and geese, and they're making products and hunting gear. And I made a sizable investment. I mentioned that, and somebody said to me, "Oh, you're so lucky." I'm like, what? Lucky? I'm like, no, I had that money in the bank ready to go. Well, you're lucky you had that. Well, you're lucky you had that relationship. Lucky I had the relationship. I moved my family across the country, spent tens of thousands of dollars, bought property out there so that I could build the relationship. It has nothing to do with luck. And I really hate it, actually, when people say that, because if you're thinking that somebody else got lucky, then all you can do is wait until you get lucky. And it just doesn't work like that.
It's like Eeyore is their spirit animal at that point. It's just a nice way to be jealous. Like, it's kind of throwing shade, and it does minimize. When people tell me, they're like, "Oh, well, George, you're only a millionaire because your house appreciated and you invested in retirement." And I'm like, yeah, that's not luck.
That's part of it.
It's like they're like, well, yeah, the housing market appreciated. Sure, I'm not in 2008. There's not a housing crash, but the amount of work it took and the side hustles and the work we did to put 45% down and then pay it off in 26 months and the work we did to consistently invest in our 401ks to build wealth, none of that was luck. In fact, it was all discipline and preparing for those opportunities. So you're so right when people are like, Ryan's lucky. He chose the right investment. He worked his butt off just to have the money and did the research to know this is a wise investment, and then it paid off. And I think it's
Right.
so easy to be dismissive of other people's success, and it really just it holds a mirror back at them, and they're upset because they don't have whatever you have. And so really, I would never take it personally when people say that.
Sure, of
They're just upset because they're not where they want to be. They probably just need a hug. That's every troll in the comment section just needs a hug.
Yeah. Okay. So when you started to go through this plan, you're talking about putting 45% down on your house, paying it off in 26 months. I already know people are like, what? That's crazy. It's not crazy. That's why you are where you are. Was your wife fully on board with this, or was this before you had met your wife? And if she wasn't on board, how did you get her on board? Because it's one thing to say, I'm going to do this. I can do this. I'm going to bear down and do this. Oh, and hun, you're going to do this too. And she's not on board.
Yeah, well, I have the blessing of having met my wife at Ramsey Solutions, and so she was already
Oh, yeah, good point.
smarter than me, better with money than me, and better looking. And so I was like blown away that she said yes. And so when we started this journey, this wasn't my first property. And so when we got married, I had some money in the bank from the equity of that first townhome sale in the Nashville area. And so on top of that, we were like, hey, let's save up a big down payment. It's a new construction townhome. It was very modest and reasonable for our area, which Williamson County is where we are here at Ramsey. It's the 11th wealthiest county in the nation.
Oh,
And
and
so
it's a beautiful area. It's
it's
Franklin,
wonderful.
right?
Yeah, Franklin
Yeah, it's
area. So we
beautiful.
moved south of Franklin because we were like, we can't afford this. Now the bank would be willing to loan us as much money as we want, basically, because they always do. But as far as what we wanted was we wanted to get a modest first starter home that we could pay off quickly. And so that meant we were going to set our sights on a townhouse instead of a single family home. And instead of being in Franklin, it's going to be in Thompson Station, just south of there. And so all of that helped us pay it off early. And what we did was we pre-decided that we wanted to have no house payment in our early 30s. And it all started when we asked ourselves real life questions like, what could we do without a mortgage payment in our early 30s? What kind of options would that give us? If one day you want to stay at home with our first kid, it won't even be a conversation. It'll just be like, great, cool. Yawn, well, let's move on. That's the kind of options I wanted to have for our family. And so becoming debt free, having that down payment, having the emergency fund, that allowed us to pay it off quickly. And so with a new construction, you have time because every delay just became another high five of we got more time to save. It just got delayed 3 months. That's 3 more months we can save before we have to show up with all the money. So that's what allowed us to put that much down. And then we had an aggressive goal. We pre-decided we're going to pay this thing off in less than 5 years. I said 4. And then my wife, being the go-getter, is like, we're going to do it in 3 or less. I was like, oh my gosh. And so I was working my tail off. I was even doing side gigs then, hosting events across the country to get the down payment saved so that we had as little of a mortgage as possible. We did a 15-year fixed rate, and then we knocked it out real quick. And so I meet people all the time. I'm not that special because I meet people in the lobby of Ramsey Solutions doing their debt-free scream in their 20s and 30s. They learned this stuff early from their parents or learning it in our curriculum in high school, and they decided, I want that kind of freedom now, not when I'm 65. And they go after it.
Yeah, that's powerful. Let's pivot a little bit, and I think it ties into what we're talking about now because what you said earlier is that the financial industry is attempting to confuse and conflate, and I recognize that when I was an advisor, I would see the insurance and investment products companies would come out with, and I mean it was ridiculous. I'm like, this is confusing to me. I'm in the business. This is confusing to me, and I got to realize, oh, that's the point,
They
because if
prey
it's
on confusion.
confusing, then they need us, right? They need a financial advisor. They need the actuaries. Because it's confusing and they don't know how to do it themselves. But in what ways specifically do you feel like the financial industry confuses and targets and preys upon, as you said, consumers?
Well, I'll give you an example in a few areas. So one, the credit score. I mean, what a genius invention back in the early 90s to go, hey, let's create a score that is your financial self-worth. And let's make it really confusing to where if you pull an inquiry, it will hurt your score. And if you pay off your debt, it would lower your score. And let's encourage behavior of making payments every month. And what that did was it gave us this little carrot dangling in front of us that said, you should get more debt. You should play the game even better. You should master the game, until you realize you're just a rat in this maze trying to get the cheese, and you're not really free. And then with credit cards, what do? I interviewed an ex-Capital One manager who told me they run tens of thousands of experiments on consumers. There is a reason they switched from cash back to points and miles, because we have no clue, Ryan, what 120,000 miles is.
Right.
Turns
It's
out
like
that's just a flight to Boise. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so then you work with student loans, and you don't know all the fine print and the interest and how that's going to work with repayment. And mortgages, a lot of confusion there. And then all these first-time homebuyer programs and income-driven repayment programs with student loans that are causing balances to go up instead of down. And then investing, goodness gracious, it is littered. I have a whole chapter on investing traps in the book that cover gambling, sports betting, whole life insurance, gold, CDs. I mean, you name it, single stocks, day trading, all of these traps out there. And even in the financial advising world, a lot of those people, they don't have the heart of a teacher. They're salespeople. They are there to sell you a product. And usually that's going to be this insurance product. Yes. And they're really good at it. And so you have to be aware about all of the inputs coming at you and how they're stealing your money, your attention, and confusing you. And at the heart of the wealth building, investing traps, I realize there's three really key emotions there. I call them the three stooges of wealth building in the book. And it's fear, greed, and pride. In every single investing trap, I could point to one of those emotions. I mean, if you want to talk about fear, gold. How many people have been saying the economy is going to crash this year, so everyone go out and buy gold and silver because it's a hedge against inflation? And I'm going, what is their incentive for you to buy these precious metals? And if it all goes down, Ryan, I want food and fuel and ammo and water. No one's going to be trading in gold. And so the other piece is greed. And we see this with crypto, the get rich quick schemes out there, day trading and single stocks. People think I'm smarter. I'm going to be the one to beat the system. And then you have pride. And that's a lot of people going, I know better. I'm the genius. I'm going to choose the right single stock at the right time and time the market, and they end up getting burnt. And so when you can put all those aside and have humility and realize you're not a financial prodigy, and it's okay to be the average investor, because you're being the tortoise, you're going to win in the end. If you just invest in the S&P 500, if you just put money in your Roth 401k, you're going to build wealth. And you don't have to do all these fancy things that people are telling you is the key to building wealth. And so I just wanted to dispel the myths and cut out all the noise in that investing traps chapter.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest, even as a former financial advisor, I have my stock market investments. So there's investments outside of that, but stock-based investments in indexed, low cost, low turnover funds. I do a quarterly rebalance, and that's it. I don't buy, I don't sell. I do a little bit of a rebalance, and I don't even look at it. It's there. It's doing its thing. I don't care. I don't care if it goes up. I don't care if it goes down.
Because you're thinking long term
about what I'm doing. Exactly.
Most people get freaked out looking at one piece of the roller coaster ride and they pull their money out. And I'm going, no. You just unplugged all of the future growth and you took it out at probably the worst time possible on top of that. Or you're investing in this one single stock because your buddy told you it's what to get. And all of that just frustrates me to no end, because building wealth is so much simpler than we think, but we try to overcomplicate it because it sounds too simple. It sounds too good to be true. So instead we make it overly complex and we end up getting burnt, or we get paralysis analysis and we don't do anything.
The credit score is a funny one to me. About a year ago, I applied to open a credit card for the business, and I have a credit card for the business. I was going to get a different one that does do points because I know how to work the system. I get it. I understand the game. I can use the game to my advantage. And they declined me. I'm like, what? Like, I was shocked. I'm like, declined? What was the reason? And they sent a letter and it said, because I didn't have enough open lines of credit. I'm like, isn't that the point?
Brilliant. Yeah, you would think you'd be rewarded for not being
exactly.
over leveraged with all these lines of credit. Right. But it just shows you how screwed up the system is. I mean, Dave Ramsay loves to joke that if he tried to go rent an apartment, they wouldn't let him. But if he tried to buy the complex, he could pay for it in cash. It's just such a stupid mentality. And it all comes down to bureaucracy and rules and people wanting the easy route. So they just go, let the computers decide if Ryan deserves this thing. And it's just so silly versus looking at Ryan's income and debt to income ratio and going, okay, he's debt free and he makes a great income. I feel like we can do this.
I
This
feel
is a
like he's
smart
got the
decision.
discipline. He can pay debts off. Like
You have the
we feel
least
like
amount
this
of
will
risk
be
to the
okay.
lender.
You would think. You would think.
You would
It's really
think.
interesting.
It's a broken system for sure.
How do you, so in the micro, I guess the idea, and you guys are doing a phenomenal job. I think you're leading the charge, is educating consumers how to learn about this stuff and do it for themselves. But then there's a larger picture, and that's, how do you change the school system? How do you change the government to institute these types of things when you have, frankly, a government who, and even the IRS, talking about hiring tens of thousands of more agents, not to help us. Don't mistake that. They're
Yep.
there to get more of our money and find that extra $600 that your sister-in-law paid you back for on that family vacation you went on. You got to pay taxes on that.
100%. I
How
mean,
do you
that's a
begin
bit.
to change those things?
Well, I've realized, I can control what I can control, and I don't have full control of the system at large and the economy and how the IRS works. And so, I try to be a law abiding citizen and buck the system when I can. And
Of
to me,
course.
that's avoiding all debt and living a very different lifestyle. And also, there's ways to minimize taxes, and there's smart things you can do to be strategic with that, which is a good time to work with a tax pro or financial advisor who can help you navigate all of that. But I've realized that the key to my success is not like hacking a certain system or like sticking it to the man. The key to my success is me, and my greatest wealth building tool is my income. So anything I can do to get that up and then live on less than I make is going to create the widest gap in margin that allows me to do the things I want to do, whether that's buy property or, go on the vacation or give more. And so I believe margin is what we're all looking for. And I have a whole chapter in the book called Margin is Breathing Room. That's what we're all looking for. We're like, even if you're doing well financially, you have a great income, people are broke. We found that 1 out of 3 people making 6 figures are still living paycheck to paycheck. So when
Mm.
people tell me, well, if I just made more money, I could, no, if you can manage the money you have, you're just going to manage it even better when you have more. And so it doesn't matter if you make 6 figures. If you have lifestyle creep eating up your income because you want to look good and upgrade your life, you're always going to feel broke.
Does Dave, I know Dave Ramsay says, I don't know, actually, does he say cash is king or cash flow is king? Because I've always thought cash flow is the
Oh,
king.
he does say cash is king, but
Yeah,
I
I
do think
disagree
he
with
would
that.
agree that cash flow is also king.
Yeah, I mean, you think about his wealth and your wealth with real estate and my business and real estate. It's not cash. I don't need $50,000 in the bank. That's done. That's fine. I need income. I need something generating income in my sleep. That's what I'm after.
Absolutely. That, and having all those revenue streams is great. I mean, Dave has that with royalties. If you're a published author or you're a musician, and
Right.
having that mailbox money come in is great. Or you have an online course that you sell and you're providing value to people. That's amazing. And so I think it's very wise to think about not always trading your time for money. Because if you can get outside of that, even if that's with your investing, if you're not a content creator, if your investments make more money than you do, you have won. If you got $2 million in the bank and you get a 10% return that year in the stock market, that's $200,000. And so if you make 100,000, you just doubled your income without doing anything, just by letting your money work for you. And so I think it's very wise to think about cash flowing assets versus depreciating assets. And things like our cars are weighing down our wealth in that regard. Student loans, consumer debt, all of that is detracting from our wealth versus, real estate, investment accounts, businesses, royalties, all of that will increase our wealth over time without us having to do all the legwork.
That's why I like the concept of Airbnb. You've got a property anyways, and now you can cash flow from it. Or a company like Turo, you can do private car rentals. It's like you got the car, you might as well rent it out if you don't need it, or there's certain dates or times you don't need it. There it is available. Now it's a depreciating asset, but it's actually earning you income. There's so many opportunities, unlike anything we've ever seen before.
Yeah, when people make excuses about income, I'm just like, there's 1,000 things. Just tell me you don't want to do it, but don't tell me you
Right.
can't. That's a very different
Right.
mentality. And you're right, with all the technology and apps out there, I mean, even as a side hustle, if you just need to go make some money, go sign up for one of these apps tomorrow and start doing that. And the key to all of this, I found, is doing it with cash. And so I'll give you an example. A caller called in the other day to the Ramsey show, and they said, hey, my husband and I were doing Turo, and it went south, and they had taken out huge loans on 3 expensive cars just to do Turo. And now they were underwater on all 3 cars. They're like, Okay, so we owe 35,000 on this one, it's only worth 20. We owe 40,000 on this one, it's only worth 25. And I'm just going, "Oh my gosh. You over leverage yourself trying to start this business and now you're
Right.
screwed. There's not enough cash flow in the world to save you." And so running your business debt free, which is what we teach in Entre Leadership, Dave's business brand, it's a beautiful thing because it cash flows beautifully when you don't have debt on it. I mean, all of Dave's properties cash flow 100% outside of his basic expenses because he doesn't have lenders to pay. And so it's an amazing thing when you just decide debt is off the table. I'm going to start and grow this thing debt free. You will have so much more success long term.
Well, George, man, this has been fascinating. A lot of great discussions. Obviously, I'd love for guys to pick up a copy of the book, Breaking Free from Broke, but let the guys know where to connect with you. Obviously, they can get a book wherever they get books, but how do they connect with you and learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, if you listen to this episode and you enjoyed it, would love for you to connect with me at Instagram, Twitter, at George Kamel. That's Kamel, Camel like the animal with a K. So I love connecting with the folks on social there. I'm very active, more than probably any other personality, because that's how I grew up. I grew up in the land of social media. And if you want to get the book, and if you're a listener, I think you're going to love the audiobook. We did our first ever enhanced audiobook with some sound design and effects, and I wrote some custom music coming in and
Very
out
cool.
to really elevate it. That brings this book to life. So you can check that out, RamseySolutions.com, Audible, wherever. And I think your listeners will enjoy that. And I hope it helps them just get some hope this year when it comes to their finances and help them build wealth with peace and confidence and ditch debt and unplug from this broken system.
Yeah, man, I think it will. I appreciate your work. I appreciate what you're doing and taking some time for us today. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, Ryan.